You're listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro, the place to learn about new technology and technological advances before they become mainstream. This podcast is sponsored by Dell Technologies, a unique family of businesses that provides the essential infrastructure for organizations to build their digital future, transform IT, and protect their most important asset, information. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro. I'm your host, Keri Roberts, and my guest today is Dallas Nash, a Senior Director of Sales of UDS at Dell Technologies. Welcome, Dallas. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks so much. I'm really honored to be here in the light of our large PowerScale launch. So thanks for having us.
Yes. Now, you are part of a specialty team called the UDS team, which stands for Unstructured Data Solutions Team. What's the story behind this, and how did it come about, and why are you excited to be involved in it?
It's a great question. And I think it's just a quick history lesson for some of your listeners and the folks out there in Radio Land. The big thing is that the UDS team was birthed out of a company by the name of Isilon. Isilon has an incredible product brand recognition in the IT space. We've been around for, I think well over a decade at this point. I think it's closer to 12, 14 years that the product's been created and the company was originally instantiated. But the big thing is as most people know, a small IT company by the name of EMC came along, and after years of successful navigation of the storage market, Isilon was purchased by EMC. And as we all know, traditionally, IT and tech purchases don't just happen one time. So Dell Technologies and Dell, with Michael Dell and a company by the name of Silver Lake, their main investment arm, saw a gap in the product portfolio and decided, EMC would be a phenomenal company to acquire and roll up under the Dell Technologies umbrella. So that happened a little over 2 years ago. And we've been really blessed to be part of the Dell ecosystem and obviously have the reach of their customer base and the long-standing relationships and the brand integrity that Michael Dell brings to the world. I believe he was just nominated as one of the most trustworthy CEOs in the country just last year. And so, again, we're super honored to be part of the Dell Technologies umbrella. And ultimately, I guess I'm mostly excited and blessed really to be a part of the Unstructured Data Solutions division, because our solutions are really at the heart of solving almost every one of our customers' main data challenges. And that is two things. One being data sprawl, which every government agency and every customer that we know struggles incredibly with. And then the second one is gleaning data insights from the data that is resident throughout this entire storage sprawl that exists in all of our customers. So it's really simple.
And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about unstructured data. What is it, and why has it been said to be comprised of the vast majority of data found in an organization? So,
and forgive me, this one's a little bit more lengthy, but what I would say is, and again, just from an educational standpoint, and people ask, I'm really happy you asked that question, because at the end of the day, unstructured data, we get that question almost every day, and people want to understand what the difference is between structured and unstructured data. So think about it this way. Structured is the typical data types that sit within a database, just as a really clean and simple example. Unstructured data or unstructured information is really the data that does not have a predefined data model. So that could be construed as data that sits in files or photos or video or ISR data within the intelligence community, data from sensors or drones or autonomous driving vehicles, because they all put out data and they need to be captured somewhere. And then ultimately, probably one of the hottest topics in the environment right now is the AI data that's being generated from either machine learning or deep learning. So that's a couple of the examples of what unstructured data is. The sprawl happens, think about it like this, just from a practical world example for people that might be in IT leadership or data management. It can be construed just simply by looking at your cell phones today. Most cell phones have gone from a very small hard drive, whether it be flash or a regular spinning disk back in the day. And most phones now have terabytes and terabytes of data storage easily resident on the device itself, because people are generating more photos and video than they ever have before, because your phone is now your camera and your video recorder. So it creates data And most people struggle consistently with not only the storage of that data, but how to use it, how to find things that are resident within it. And so that's a big part of it. So you asked a really great question. What's happening with that data and what's accounting for the data sprawl? We gave you a couple examples of the data types and what's happening in terms of that radical generation of data. But most of our analysts are seeing that approximately 80% of a government agency or just a standard commercial organization's data set is unstructured now. So it comprises almost the vast majority of data within their systems today. The unstructured data market right now, what we see and hear from IDC and other analysts, is set to grow by about 3x in the next 4 years. So what's really important, and more important than ever before, is to help our customers really develop an unstructured data strategy, which if you follow me on LinkedIn, which is just simply Dallas Nash at LinkedIn, so it's very simple. I've got a really easy name. That's DALLAS, like the city. Last name Nash, NASH, like again, Nashville, Tennessee. So one of the things that I talk about there with frequency is this idea of a hashtag data first strategy, where people are now developing storage concepts within their environment, really based around data first, as opposed to just putting random storage silos within their network. So couple things, right? As you establish these data silos, and that's been the historical way. And when I use the example of a silo, we all understand that silos were set up for independent farmers with grain or wheat or whatever it is, and they are resident through these communities of farms. In these cases, the silos in our customer bases represent individual data types and data sets that have been stored on legacy platforms. Our competitors really, I think, are in that market producing this legacy style storage environment for both file and block. Block is, again, that typical block-based storage that is anything other than file and the examples that I gave previously. So the second problem that's created is not only the siloing of this information. So Isilon was initially developed to solve for that. This idea of a creation of a data lake where you break down all those silos and you collapse all of that information into an accessible, easy to find, easy to search, easy to store, and hyperscale environment, so that we're no longer tied to these silos of being able to put one data set over here, another data set over there. All data, if it's, again, unstructured, can live within the Isilon or PowerScale family. So the big problem that our customers were facing is this idea of gleaning business value, or what you're seeing in industry called business analytics, and being able to run analysis against your data types in this data lake so that you can glean business value out of it. So very simple.
So I'm curious, what is the value of unstructured data? Because if it's comprised of 80% of what's found in an organization, but most people aren't sure what it is or where it is, like, is it valuable, or how is it valuable to a business?
That's a great question. And I appreciate you asking that, because I think if you looked at the autonomous driving world, and again, I'm going off my, outside of my notes right now, but I think if you look at just a couple of our major customers, so this idea of creation of autonomous driving, that's one of the huge markets that Isilon was initially playing in. And it's also something that we've been able to push the business intelligence closer to the edge. And I'll come back to that in a different conversation as we break down the edge, the core, and the cloud. But the key caveat here is that when you are trying to deliver and ascertain business intelligence, what you're really looking to do is, how do you get more performance, or how do you determine business insights from the data that you've already collected? In a lot of cases, and let me just go to the intelligence community, the intelligence community has been taking mapping data, blimp-style deployment data for war zone and combat areas. The warfighter is being able to generate in their own heads-up display data as it pertains directly to the immediate interaction between the warfighter and the ground combat. So what's interesting is, as you start collecting all that data, and going back to my autonomous driving example, we started looking at, for instance, I won't use brand names, but a major autonomous driving company, and we've all seen them, right? That's been the hot topic in the automotive world today. So as you're collecting all of this information, whether whether it be identification of a person as they're looking through, looking to cross at a crosswalk. How do you know to stop the car for a person? And how do you determine whether that's an actual person or a stop sign? So those are the types of things that come in with big data or machine learning and deep learning as an example. And we're able to glean that and help the customer process that information faster, more effectively, because again, it's all living inside the data lake. The other thing that we can do is ultimately you may have autonomous driving data, but you want to combine that with your IT organization's standard file data. And then you might also want to look at surveillance information. So that's been another really big topic in the DoD and Intel and civilian government space, because cameras are becoming very prevalent, whether it's for policing or border crossings or things along that line. So as you're collecting all of that data on scale, you need a place to put it in a singular environment without having to make additional investments. And Isilon and PowerScale allow that flexibility.
And as you said, data takes up a lot of space, and a lot of people have heard about the cloud, but I'd love for you to kind of define in easy terms the difference between what the edge is, what the core is, and what the cloud are. What's kind of the definition of each one, and how are they different, and what are they best used for?
Now, the snappy people in marketing came up with edge to core to cloud, and I really love that, but I'm going to start with the core, because the core is really that standard data center that everyone has been using for the lifespan of IT, whether that's an on-prem solution inside a customer's own data center, or if they do outsourcing and data center as a managed service. Those are all examples of large systems collecting broad scale and broad sweeping data, and also doing a ton of compute. So think about it from a perspective of it's encompassed with storage, computer processing, and networking. And that's usually what's all inside the core of the data center. And again, we talked earlier, in the historical market, that's where those silos would exist. In the edge, going back to that analogy, we have now, because of the release of PowerScale and our new node types within the Isilon and PowerScale family, we're pushing the business intelligence and the ability to store data and run business analytics closer to where the customer does actual operations. So think about it this way. We deal with a large organic farming company. And again, I know this isn't relative to the government, but in this example with our PowerScale launch, we talked to this customer at length on our major launch video, and they talked at their standard core operations in their standard data centers where the data is being captured. They have to send that from every local farm in their entire company, and that can be from mainland Europe back into the United States. They also have major data center and IT operations resident in Canada as well. And so think about all of that data having to traverse very fat pipes on the network. The edge is really that independent family farm that is a part of this organic company, and they're producing and doing all of these farming, really aggressive farming details at the edge of the network. And as part of that, they want that particular farm to be able to adjust for temperature, humidity, wind. An example is another thing that they look at very consistently, soil pH levels, things like that, right? And we want to enable, in this particular example, to be able to allow those family farms to adjust their IT data and their IT operations to adjust for all of those changes in the farming ecosystem. So it allows them to take on the fly data assessments, and more importantly, how that data assessment is impacting their productivity and their yield. So those are a couple really good examples. You could also make the case as an individual warfighter or an actual soldier in the field having and doing that same data collection. They're having to take real-time assessments of GPS location, wind, if there's somebody that's coming in with a drone strike, things along that line. All that now can be pushed down to the warfighter into a Humvee or a very mobile tactical vehicle at the very edge of the network. That data can then be collected in real time and then brought back when that Humvee or other vehicle is then returned to the core part of the networking environment. And then that can all be collapsed into the core of the data center. I guess the last part of your question is really the cloud. So we all understand what it's like to have an opinion. I think there's probably a million different opinions of what the cloud represents to the general IT user. In our case, what it means for us is we're giving availability and choice to our customers, especially in the federal government, between our friends at Microsoft and their Azure cloud, our friends in Google, in GCP. That's another big announcement that's just come up, and how we've inserted our major technology of Isilon and PowerScale into that particular operating environment, and also our friends at Amazon and C2S specifically within the federal government. So why is that important? Because again, most people don't want a single vendor. They obviously want flexibility and, more importantly, choice, usually predicated on price and other value drivers that they might get from a very specific provider. So we give the customer that flexibility and that choice to span between Google, Amazon, or Microsoft Azure. So very, very simple.
That's been the best definition I've heard of the three, because I almost think of the core you're saying is almost like the headquarters, and the edge is kind of like the local entities of that. And then the cloud is kind of covering all of it. Would that be correct?
Yeah, and again, right, the cloud is that nebulous, flexible place where you can put either long-term data in cold storage, things that might not be accessed all that frequently, or you just want to simply get rid of your IT operations entirely. You want to get rid of your data centers, which has been a major government initiative for the last 5 years, and you want to simply push that IT service up into the cloud and let somebody else become the IT administrator for your entire government agency. And that's happening all across the government. And it doesn't necessarily need to be those three commercial entities. It could be somebody like this as well, which is really known as the cloud provider for the DoD. So you do have that great flexibility. And again, that's saying you want to go with something that is actually outside your control. There is still the idea of offering an on-prem solution that operates like a cloud, which we call a hybrid cloud solution, where the government or the specific government agency would be in control of their own data, but reflecting that as a cloud service.
Thank you for breaking that down. I know that that was really helpful for me, and for those listening, if you've been confused, I think that's a really nice breakdown, Dallas. I appreciate that. I just want to go back to what you were talking about autonomous driving. Are you speaking to like self-driving cars when you say that?
That's exactly what I'm speaking to. And that's really commercial vernacular. So if you think about what's happened over the last 5 years, companies like Tesla being able to get in a vehicle, set the address, and drive down the road for 5-10 miles on a highway where the car itself does the braking and things along that line, that is certainly one effort. But if you kind of manipulate that concept and bring it back into really a federal viewpoint or a global government viewpoint, what it means is we have a number of autonomous driving and flying machines in the purview of the US and other global government entities. And so what that does is it really kind of changes the concept of what autonomous driving means within the confines of the government. So we could be leveraging drone surveillance data coming in as a video feed. We could allow that machine, because again, the pilot is maybe back at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, and be able to do things like that. But again, these autonomous driving vehicles were really birthed out of the federal government. So it's pretty incredible when you think about it, that the companies like Tesla and Jaguar and others are Volvo in particular, are all making very big jumps into autonomous driving.
Now, how does your company identify opportunities and kind of find areas where your organization can thrive and help your ideal customers?
Well, the great news is, as I explained earlier, every one of our customers is going through the data sprawl challenge. They all have silos of data resident on multiple vendors. And the great news about Dell Technologies, and this really comes into why and what we call inside Dell, the power of Dell. And so as you start talking about the Dell Technologies portfolio, you start looking very aggressively at the fact that it's EMC, the legacy EMC company. It's companies like VMware. It's companies like in the security purview, like RSA. You no longer have to go outside the umbrella and deal with 15 different vendors to get a single major solution that you know is going to be stood behind by a major technology giant like Dell Technologies. So that's how we get to it, is that we're solving for a very specific problem, which is data sprawl and being able to glean data, or business intelligence from the customer's data sets. but we're also able to offer so much more. Financial services, being able to acquire stuff for an IT implementation in a very different way. Services. And again, going back to the standard Dell protocol, laptops, desktops, servers. I mean, we're the number one market share worldwide in servers. And we're up by 20 points on our next competitor. So it's a very compelling story when you get into the power of Dell and doing more through Dell and their umbrella of companies.
And Dell Technologies within their kind of federal sector has something new they just recently launched called PowerScale Nodes. Can you share with us what this is and maybe some case studies of how it's helped your customers in a simple, flexible, and smart way?
So great question, right? And to get to the actual hardware, you have to first talk about the central operating system, which is resident on both Isilon and these new PowerScale nodes. The transition really comes from the OneFS operating system at the core of everything that Isilon was and everything that's PowerScale is going to be. And so while it's still very early in the adoption of the PowerScale nodes, the thing that everyone needs to understand is that our customers that have been sitting and working with Isilon as a brand for the last 12 to 15 years, they acknowledge that right out of the gate, and Gartner backs this up, that we are by far the number one unstructured data platform worldwide. So we've got over 17,000 customers. We recently just sold an exabyte to a single customer delivered at a single time on like 34 different semi-trucks, delivering all of that storage to one single operating environment. So that's an incredible story. We've got 1,500 customers that are brand new to Dell Tech in 2019. We own 60% of the Fortune 500 customers. And by far, the Isilon PowerScale family of solutions in unstructured data is by far the federal government's number one platform of choice. So it's an incredible story. And again, why is it important, right? It comes back to what have we done recently? So we've consolidated everything in the OneFS operating system that makes Isilon and PowerScale function. And we've added the PowerScale nodes. That's the whole release that I was just talking about. And the PowerScale nodes allow for more compute power and more storage as part of an overall cluster at the edge of the network. So it allows those farms, or it allows that warfighter to consolidate that data at the edge, take really real-time business analysis, and make, in some cases, life-saving decisions at the edge of the network. So these new nodes have come out, like you've just asked, and these new nodes operate in mostly an all-flash function, which is great. They're bringing NVMe home, which has been a big thing that our customers have asked for in the last 18 months. But most importantly, we have transitioned off of the Isilon hardware platform onto the Dell server platform. And PowerEdge is by far, again, like I just iterated, the number one server platform of choice worldwide, bar none.
You know, when we're talking about data and we're talking about the cloud and all of this, is there an unlimited amount of data that you can have in the cloud? Like, do we ever reach a point where we don't have any room?
Well, great question. I would start first with, if you were to think about an unlimited data storage footprint, creating a largest data lake imaginable, there's no limit to what Isilon and PowerScale can do. That's the most important thing. The second thing is that in some cases, there is going to be some measure of limitation because budgets are finite. So conceptually, I don't think there's ever a limitation on how much data can be created, and more importantly, how that data can be stored. But as we all know, right, I wish I had an unlimited budget. I'd be driving a much nicer car today. But at the core of the question, it's both a yes and a no answer. Yes, I think we can scale limitless. Yes, I think we can solve for those technology challenges, but it does come down to budgets. And that's why the Isilon and PowerScale family offers many, many different platforms, whether it's an all-flash array, a hybrid array, which is legacy spinning disk coupled with a flash implementation, or we can just go to very low performance, very grand scale capacity on our lowest end, but again, storing for cold archive in a lot of cases.
The one question we ask all of our guests here on this show, Dallas, is where do you see technology going within the next year? And it can be about data or technology as a whole.
You know what? I think that's probably the most fun question I've ever been asked when I've been having these types of conversations. I like to think about life as a futurist. I wish I was better at it. I completely love listening to folks that start talking about projection of technology into the future. What I would say is that I think what we're talking about here, especially in terms of the PowerScale and Isilon families within unstructured data, and I'll just answer from that capacity because, again, I'd be getting over my skis, I think, pretty quickly. But at the end of the day, if I look at this, I see probably that 3x number that we were talking about earlier in your broadcast, and the idea that the data that's being generated is going to hit that 3x benchmark in about, by next year or even by 2024. I think the number is going to be much bigger because I think right now we've seen the Internet of Things. We've seen all of these data delivering devices everywhere in the network, whether it's at the very edge of your life. We're starting to see televisions and networking consoles embedded in refrigerators. All of that type of technology is producing data, and that data is going to scale and increase and get us to a point in the near future that I don't think people are heavily prepared for. In fact, in my own home-based system, I just bought a new 8 terabyte hard drive. I didn't think that was even a concept for a home user just 18 months ago. And it certainly wasn't affordable. Now it's both affordable and accessible. And so I think one of the things we have to get very smart on is, do we collect the data? How long do we store that data? What type of information can I glean from that data? And then most importantly, how can I store and secure that data in the long term? And I think that's pretty much where the world is going. I know it's somewhat of an obvious answer, but in my life and the things that I'm seeing, I think we're just going to get there much quicker than we expect.
Yeah, I agree with you. And my organizational brain, it kind of explodes when I hear you say that. Do you have any suggestions of how people can organize that data? I mean, because if you just think like, oh, it's always going to be saved, it's secure, and you're not really going through it, do you have any suggestions of how you would organize it? And like you said, know what to get rid of and what to keep?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? So I'll answer it quickly from an individual IT consumer. If you haven't backed up your family photos or you haven't backed up your home-based system and you haven't done that recently, do it quickly. Get it to a product or to a company where you can ensure that you can recover from an outage. The great news from a UDS perspective, all of our products and technologies are built with that same major concept of data protection at the heart of everything that we do. So in the event it's an Isilon or a PowerScale failure, we have the #1 data protection algorithms built into the technology. It allows for multiple node failures. It allows our customers to recover, and not only recover, but operate during an outage, so that this idea of downtime almost goes away entirely. So you asked the last most important question, which is, how can we avoid those types of data loss issues into the future? And then what do we do? And knowing that our data is sitting out there for maybe a long period of time, like 3, 5, 10 years in some cases, especially as we digitize health records or other personnel information. The one thing that I can say with confidence, I've never been prouder to work in an IT organization like UDS within Dell Technologies, because that is where the rubber hits the road for us. When the data is resident in our data lakes, we've now instituted this software solution as an overlay to our hardware called Data IQ. It's the missing link that's been the biggest point of necessity. So it allows you to investigate not just our product sets, but other vendors and those siloed technologies that we talked about in other storage brands that are sitting resident within a customer's data center. It allows us to see what's out there, the type of data that it is. Is it a good candidate to pull into the broader Isilon or PowerScale data lake? how do we better manage that data? And more importantly, when do we move it off of our most expensive assets like PowerScale or Isilon? And when do we move it out to maybe a cloud-based solution like GCP, like Google, where we have full-scale Isilon resident in that particular cloud environment, and you could do and back up and effectively protect that data that was paramount to your IT operations in 2010, but because it hasn't been accessed in over 10, 15 years, move that out to the cloud or to a very much more low-cost performance tier within the UDS family. So we do have that flexibility for our customers.
Well, that's good to hear, because that would seem overwhelming, I think, for some. So it's good to hear that your company is able to help with so many pieces when it comes to the data.
Thank you. Yes, I couldn't agree more. It's an incredible time to be at Dell Technologies, especially in the UDS family.
Now, where can people learn more about what we talked about today, if they want to connect with you to ask questions?
Great question. So Ingram is always a phenomenal resource. I would push you there first. They're a phenomenal technology partner to us. And more importantly, they're a phenomenal sales partner to us. So that's a great place to start. As I said, you can always reach out to me individually at LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer questions or help our customers on a one-off basis. And then obviously you can jump back to the old web and find the Dell Technologies website at www.dell.com. And you can do a couple quick searches. You can search for unstructured data solutions. You can search for PowerScale, which again is our brand new portfolio of products. And then you can also search on our legacy product set, which is Isilon. So we have all those readily available, as well as white papers and customer references. And most importantly, the work that we've done within the federal government. So you have a myriad of options. Let's just say
Perfect. Yes, I love it. Well, thank you so much, Dallas, for sharing your knowledge and really your passion for what you do and breaking some of these concepts down for us. So thank you so much.
Well, hopefully you guys have something to take back. I'm only a sales guy, but I do have an entire stable of really intelligent engineers. And we also have access to a number of CTOs that play in very specific worlds and use cases, things like video surveillance, or I talked about autonomous driving and just data monetization, next-gen applications. So we've got CTOs that are definitely resonant over healthcare and things along that line as well. And I've got access to a lot of very bright people that I'm sure, extremely excited to help our customers.
Well, thank you so much. And if you liked this episode or have a question, join the discussion on Twitter at Ingram Tech Soul with the hashtag B2B Tech Talk. Thank you for tuning in and subscribing to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro.
You've been listening to B2B Tech Talk with Ingram Micro, hosted by Keri Roberts. This episode was sponsored by Dell Technologies. B2B Tech Talk is a joint production with Sweetfish Media and Ingram Micro. Ingram Micro production handled by Laura Burton. To not miss an episode, subscribe today to your favorite podcast platform.